Hello, and welcome everyone to today's webinar brought to you by Gerber Technology and ExactFlat. My name is Ethan Donald, CEO of ExactFlat, and I will be your host for the next 30 minutes. Our topic today is why are some furniture manufacturers faster and more profitable than others? There are many possible answers to this question. Today, we're going to look at the question from the perspective of the textile and leather upholstery that covers furniture. As we all know, upholstery is a major driver of consumer decision-making. Upholstery design and development operations are considerable. Improving them can have a significant impact on cost, profit, and customization. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping items. First, this session is being recorded, and we will provide you with a link so you can watch again and share with your colleagues. Next, the webinar is in listen-only mode. If you have questions, please post them in the chat feature or the Q&A feature located at the bottom of the screen at any time. I have several colleagues standing by, ready to answer your questions in real time. Finally, if this webinar piques your interest, we'll provide information at the end on how you can look into this topic further and evaluate if this is right for your business. Today's webinar is no longer than 35 minutes, so feel free to stay with us until the end. Now that that's all done, let's get started. Our example today is this chair. It's a real product, it's commercially available, and it's sold to real customers. It's a relevant example because it is also a premium product even though design and development was faster. And with regard to the upholstery patterns themselves, they were made up to 50 times faster. So if you're not one of the better, more profitable companies, the real question is what can you do about it and how can you become one of them? Our solution is simple. Convert your manual upholstery and pattern making processes to digital. Use 3D to 2D digital pattern making to create your patterns. Here's the workflow. Step 1, prepare a 3D design with pattern pieces defined. Step 2, convert the 3D model to 2D patterns using ExactFlat. Step 3, create an output file for importing into Gerber AccuMark. Step 4, import your file and add pattern features in AccuMark, such as seam allowances, notches, and grain lines. Step 5, send your patterns to be cut on a Gerber cutter. The whole process is faster, easier, has less steps, and produces accurate patterns that fit great. We are now going to show this process live. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A or the chat feature. Here, we are starting with a 3D model with pattern geometry already defined. You can see there are pieces at the back, the inside armrest, this front section here. We won't be concerned with the hole. That will be made from a different material. There are also pattern pieces defined at the front, at the bottom, as well as the back. The first step in our process is to flatten the patterns. To do this, we're going to rectangle select and hit the flatten icon, and there you go. It's that easy. These are our initial flat patterns. You can notice from these flat patterns that there's color coding on them. And before we begin and go further, we're going to just get rid of the 3D model here. So I'm going to turn off some of these layers. First, we're going to go and use our top viewport so we can see from top down. We'll just resize here. And we're going to go and select the layers that we want. We'll get rid of the 3D model from the viewport. There we go. So here we have our pattern pieces. Now these are our initial flat patterns. These are not yet optimized. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through an optimization process. But before we do that, we're going to change the pattern geometry. We're going to edit it. This is like customization on the fly. So all we have to do is we select a piece. I'm going to move these pieces out of the way first. We're going to select an edge, and we're going to use our delete cut feature to change the pattern geometry. So use delete cut, click on the edge, it automatically sews those two pattern pieces together. Let's look at it again. Select the edge, delete cut, there we go. And very, very quickly we can customize the pattern geometry just like that. So whether the design intent was the final design that was going to be used, or if we want to change it, it's very easy to do so. Now you'll notice on these pattern pieces that there's a color coding and there's these cross hatch marks. The cross hatch marks represent folds or wrinkles. They typically occur in areas of high curvature. So we have to get rid of those folds and wrinkles before we go further. To do this, we're going to use our pelt flattening algorithm. And you can see as we do that, it's already relaxing some of the strain that was inherent in our initial flat patterns. Now we are not yet optimized yet, but we're getting closer to the process. You can see by the color coding where there's areas of strain and areas of sag. The red and the yellow represent areas of strain or elongation where the fabric has to stretch, and areas are black, they represent areas of sag where you have bunching of the fabric. Now we're going to use our optimizer to reduce the strain and sag, and it's a pretty straightforward process. We just simply select our spring icon, we select each of the individual pieces, and what the algorithm is going to do now is it's going to search for areas of strain and sag and eliminate them. We're going to just keep our default settings, and now we're going to keep our material setting at cotton. We could change that to leather or any of the 85 other materials that we have in our database, but for now we'll just keep it at the default settings. So you can see as the algorithm runs, it is searching for areas of strain and sag, and it is eliminating them. You should see the colors changing as we go from piece to piece. Now what's happening here is the vertices, these are the intersection points of the mesh, are allowed to walk. These vertices can move around and reorient themselves in order to distribute sag or to eliminate the strain. It is absolutely unique in the marketplace. There are about a dozen different flattening software programs in the marketplace, and maybe you have tried some of them. But ExactFlat is aptly named. The flat patterns that are produced are exact. You can see that it just eliminated all that strain and sag on that one pattern piece. And it does so fairly quickly. We're just going to let this run. And it'll cycle through each piece. And I suspect the following pieces will a little bit faster to go through because there's less strain and sag and they were not particularly complex geometry. Now this will work on any type of geometry that you model, whether it be a chair that has very clean lines, whether it be lofty. As long as you can model it, you'll be able to flatten it with an ExactFlat. And you see, that's it. That's how long it takes to generate an accurate flat pattern. The next thing we're going to do is we're just going to arrange these pattern pieces in space. This is very helpful to see which piece goes with which piece. Now, in a situation like this where we only have 6 pattern pieces, it is not so difficult to see adjacent pieces and pieces that are related to one another. However, if you have more pattern pieces, it's a very easy step. We use our find tool. So what I'm doing right now is just making this pattern piece on a plane, just organized on a plane. Now I'm going to use the our find tool. And for this, what we do is we just click an edge, and the neighboring edge will be found. Because we're going from 3D to 2D, all these pattern pieces are associated with one another. And that's why we can do this very quickly. So no need to walk the patterns here. You get a perfect alignment of your pattern pieces very quickly and very easily. And this helps with a visual check to see that your patterns have been flattened appropriately. Let's just rotate this piece around and drag it into place there. There we go. Actually going to just put some space in here. And that's it. There's your pattern pieces. There's your flat, optimized pattern pieces. The next part of the process is to create a DXF file that we can use to import our pattern geometry into AccuMark. So we're going to name our file. We're using the DXF export feature that's embedded in ExactFlat. And now we're just going to re-import the file back in so we can just have a visual check. And there's your pattern pieces in about 7 minutes. All right, we've covered quite a bit of ground there. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature or the chat feature below, and we'll be happy to try and answer them. We've tried to demonstrate how to shift your manual processes to digital, and in doing so, how you can save a tremendous amount of time in developing your patterns, and also how you can customize your pattern geometry on the fly. We're going to shift gears now, and we're going to go through the AccuMark process. So we've created a DXF. We're going to import that into AccuMark and show you the rest of the process. AccuMark has been the gold standard in 2D patterning for many, many years now. And we're going to go through the process of importing our file into the 2D patterning environment. Now, because AccuMark has such a large install base and people are very familiar with it, we're not going to go into too much detail in highlighting all of the different features of AccuMark. That's probably for a different day. And I'm sure most of you have probably seen it, heard of it, and if you have not, we'd be happy to go through this with you. But suffice to say, there is a high degree of compatibility between ExactFlat and AccuMark. You can see you can import different layer states. It's very important to get the unit systems correct. And AccuMark can actually search for notches, it can search for drills, and it can search for markings on a pattern piece and convert those into meaningful attributes to save you time. One of the things we did not do in the export process with ExactFlat is assign alignment notches and things like that. Had we done so, those alignment notches could be imported into AccuMark and they could be available for adjustment or using as is if it were a part of the design process. Now here you can see we're just importing the individual pattern pieces, and we've chosen a standard DXF file as our import file format. And there's the 6 pattern pieces that we created in ExactFlat. We're just going to select them all, and we're going to import them. And there's our pieces right there. Now we're just going to drag them into the window here for our pattern editing, and you can see that we have some symmetrical pieces, or not necessarily symmetrical. There's a symmetrical pattern piece in the middle, but there are mirror images, so we don't have to bring all of the pieces in here. See, those two are mirror images of one another. It's not necessary to do pattern development on the mirror image because we can easily replicate them later. So we're just going to get rid of those pieces out of the work area, and we're just going to work on the pieces that are shown. Now when importing pieces such as these, you can see we're going to click on this piece right here. You can see there are a lot of control points here. Too many control points for the purposes that we have today. So we're going to go ahead and decimate the number of control points and reduce them. It's a pretty straightforward process. See, we just click the button to reduce the control points. And there you go. Control points have been decimated. Now we have a more manageable number that's commensurate with the type of curvature that we have for this particular pattern piece. Now that we've reduced the number of control points, the next thing we want to focus on is oftentimes when you import pattern geometry into AccuMark, there will be a cut line and there'll be a pattern edge line. So the pattern edge line is actually the edge of the pattern piece, and the cut line is the line that cuts with the seam allowance added. And if there's no seam allowance on import, often these two lines will be superimposed on top of each other. What we're going to do now is we're just going to check for that, and we're going to delete the superimposition of the lines, and we're just going to have one perimeter edge so that when we put seam allowances on later, we'll have the correct geometry. It's a pretty straightforward process, and again, this is the kind of thing that if you want to know more detail, we can have an AccuMark specific session to go over this kind of stuff. Suffice to say, it is a very easy process. You'll see we'll get through this in just a few seconds on this particular part. The next thing we want to take note of is you see the little triangles there. Those triangles denote the specific locations in which the knife will start to cut. And we may not want the knife to cut from those places. So we're going to go ahead and make some adjustments. First thing we're going to do is we're going to put a a midpoint in this line here, and that's where we want the knife to start cutting right there. And then we're going to go ahead up to the top of this pattern piece, and we're going to delete that mark location, so that this knife will cut as a sweep around this whole perimeter edge. And you see that's pretty easy to do. So if you have to make adjustments like that where the knife begins cutting and ending, those are the easy things that we can do, and it's pretty straightforward. Now, if we decided to make a marker with these pieces as they are, they would be brought into the marker in this orientation, and that may not be what we want. So we're going to go ahead and rotate these pieces here. We're going to rotate them by 90 degrees. So what we do is we just first go ahead and select the pieces. Yep, they're all 4 selected. Click OK, and you can see they're rotated. Now we have to adjust the grain orientation. You can see the grain orientation is denoted by the axes with the arrows. So we're going to go ahead and rotate the grain lines, put new grain lines in. There we go. And now we have a grain line that will be consistent with the fabric, and we can get rid of these other lines because we don't need them. So let's just go ahead and delete those. Click on delete, pick the line. Lines are selected. And there we go, they're gone. Now if we bring them to the marker, they're going to be brought into the marker in this orientation with this grain direction. Okay, we're just about ready to save the model. But before I do that, I just want to clean up a few things. I'm just going to move this grain line down to the bottom of this pattern piece. There's no functional difference by having the grain line higher or lower. It's just a cosmetic thing. And once we're done that, we're going to save this model and save the pieces. So let's just click OK here, select the model, and click OK. All right, now let's just make a few little edits to the model. So let's open it up again. Let's click Continue. And there are our pieces. Now, if you recall, we had mirror images, so we can go ahead and delete the pieces that we don't need. So let's just select that one, the bottom one here, and delete that row. And the next thing is we have to actually create the second mirror image. So we're just going to put in the X direction. We're going to expect a flip of these pieces here. This particular piece, number 1, and piece number 4. So we're going to put a 1 in the column here, and these will be flipped in the X direction. Now let's just save the model again and save the pieces, and you can see there we have the pieces that are ready to go. So we're going to overwrite the previous one. All right, now that we've finished orienting our pattern pieces and the grain lines, if we want to add additional features, for example, alignment notches, we can select the edge onto which we want to place them. We can use measurement tools to measure the location where you want the notch in relation to a starting location. So for example, on this piece here, why don't we go ahead and measure, and let's just put in 4 inches from the end vertice point, and click OK, and then you see we have the slit notch, which has just been added. The tools are very flexible, so that notches can be put in a very versatile way. And if we wanted also to put measurement dimensions onto lines, you can see we've just added dimension lines there. And there's additional tools for making adjustments to lines. For example, if you want to make a line parallel to another line, you can do that quite easily. In this particular instance, the pattern pieces look very good, and that's because they were generated in ExactFlat. So very little pattern editing is required. And now we're going to go ahead and create a marker. This is a cost marker. We're going to select a material width here. In this case, why don't we use 55? And also we're going to select easy marking for our example here and create a marker. And if we wanted to, we could put the fabric cost in, but let's just go ahead and create a marker and click OK. And now the program is transferring the file. And there it is. There's our easy marker. There are other marker making options in AccuMark, but I think this will conclude our AccuMark demonstration for now. Just as in the ExactFlat demo, we have covered a lot of ground during this AccuMark demonstration. So if you have any questions, I would encourage you right now to go into the chat box or the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. And if you have a question, go ahead and ask it right now. Now, the last step in the process is to take the marker file and export to a Gerber cutter for automated cutting. And there you have it. 5 steps from 3D CAD to cutter and a full digital process. This is why some companies are faster and more profitable than others. The transformation to digital eliminates manual process. Digital creation is faster, digital editing is faster, and digital sharing is faster. There are 2 changes that supercharge your patterning process. First, envision and design your patterns in 3D. Secondly, take your pattern geometry in 3D and convert it to 2D using a tool like ExactFlat. Making these changes will enable customization without cost increases. You'll be able to customize your pattern geometry, your pattern materials, and your pattern graphics using digital techniques. That concludes the presentation portion of our webinar today. Now, let's take some questions. First question. What kind of 3D files can you use? Well, there are over 20 supported file types, including common file types such as STEP and IGES. If you want to know more about which ones are supported, send us an email afterwards. We'll be happy to discuss with you. Next question. Can you use laser scanned input? The answer is yes. Laser scanning requires you to do some processing of your file before bringing it into 3D CAD. That processing typically defines the pattern pieces and makes a usable 3D file. But laser scanning is a very, very common practice. It is supported by our technology. And if you want to know more about laser scanning and how to do it, we have a workflow and we have some videos that can support your decision making. What I'd recommend you do is just send us an email after the webinar and we'll go over that for you. But laser scanning is fully supported. Next question. I have a library of DXF files from different let me try that again. I have a library of DXF files from a different 2D CAD software. Can I bring those into AccuMark? Yes, you can. AccuMark supports a variety of different file types, including ASTM and AAMA DXF files. If you want to convert your 2D workflow and your 3D workflow, or just your 2D workflow, or just your 3D workflow, both of those options are available, or all of those options are available to you. I suggest you send us an email after this and we can go through the whole conversion process and show you how you can benefit from just converting your 2D workflow and possibly your 3D workflow as well. Next question. Next question is, we already model in 3D. How long does it take to learn? Well, given that you're already modeling in 3D, to learn ExactFlat takes about half a day. It's a very straightforward program to learn how to use. With respect to AccuMark 2D patterning, we're going to assume that you have some 2D patterning experience already since you're a furniture maker, and you can probably be up and running in about a week. That is going from 3D to 2D to cutter in about a week or so. Next question. Next question. Do you support network licensing? Yes. Yes, we do. Next question. Next question is about relief cuts. Can you put in relief cuts or darts in your 3D model? The answer is yes. ExactFlat has advanced but very simple to use tools for putting both relief cuts and darts in 3D or in 2D. And I hate to keep saying this, but I do recommend that you email us after the webinar and we can demonstrate this feature to you. Okay, let's take one more question. Last question. Question is, can you talk a little bit about how ExactFlat works and how it creates a flat pattern? Sure. Well, ExactFlat takes into account material properties of the fabric in question and the specific shape of the pattern, the geometric shape of the pattern, that is. So an input into the algorithms will be the material warp, weft, weave, and stretch. And for stretch, we'll use standard engineering characteristics like the Young's modulus and Poisson ratio. There are a series of algorithms that then flatten the pattern piece, and it does so by looking for strain and sag. it searches for strain and sag and tries to eliminate it by reorienting or distorting the pattern piece in such a way that both are eliminated. Now, this may sound complex, and it is complex, but what you have to remember is it's very simple for you to use. Now, the beginning part is inputting material properties. So we have about 85 or so materials in the database, very standard materials like leather and cotton and nylon and composite fibers and things like that. But if the material that you have is not in the database, then we have a mechanism for you to have it tested and put it in, and it's a very straightforward process. And I'll say it again, if you want to know more, we're happy to discuss this, and what I recommend is you send an email after the webinar has been finished. Okay, I think we're going to wrap up the questions there. Let's talk about next steps. If you're interested in knowing more, we have a very simple process for helping you to evaluate if this is right for your business. You send us a file in 3D, we'll flatten it. You can then test the file against existing pattern pieces and check the accuracy, check the fit, check the dimensions in such a way that you satisfy yourself that it does produce an accurate pattern. We think that you'll be very, very pleasantly surprised at the accuracy of the output. And if you like it, you can adopt it. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, let's circle back to our original question. Our topic today has been, why are some furniture manufacturers faster and more profitable than others? There were additional questions we asked, such as what can you do about it and how can you become one of them? And our recommendation was very simple. Convert manual process to digital and use 3D to 2D digital pattern making. We demonstrated the solution using two industry-leading products, ExactFlat and AccuMark from Gerber Technology. And if you're interested in taking the next step to get faster and more profitable, here's what you can do. Contact us. We'll provide a custom example on your specific designs, and we'll work with you and suggest the best workflow. That about wraps it up. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. This webinar presented by ExactFlat and Gerber Technology. You can find more information on the web, contact your local Gerber sales rep, or sales@exactflat.com, and we'd be happy to help.